Michael Weaver had learned to ration his memories the way he rationed grief. Small portions, taken at night, when the apartment windows fogged and the city hummed like a refrigerator. 10 years earlier, on a rain-fat evening off Alki, his wife vanished. Her name was Elise when he spoke it aloud, but in the quiet of his head, she was 1,000 other names. The woman in the yellow slicker, the handwriting on grocery lists, the breath that used to turn warm against his neck at 3:17 a.m. That was the time her alarm had always sung 3 soft chimes before the old clock went quiet. On the 10th anniversary of the night Elise went missing, the chimes came back. At 3:17 a.m., the cheap digital on Michael's nightstand lit up in weak blue. The apartment was breathless. The rain on Aurora Avenue had paused as if something were listening. 3 notes, not his clock, threaded through the dark, bright, fragile, exactly as he remembered. He sat up so quickly the bed frame barked against the wall. There was no clock like Elise's anywhere in the place. He had thrown it away 7 years ago, angry at the way it kept a time he no longer wanted. The next morning he called in sick and walked to the water. The sound was a sheet of hammered metal under a sky the color of dishwater. A gull wheeled, screamed, and fled as if scared by something Michael couldn't see. He caught himself scanning faces along the promenade. A woman in a red beanie, another with a pale, pinched mouth. None were Elise. None could be. Time had been merciless to him, but kind to the ghosts of his imagination. He went home by way of Pike and saw her reflected in the butcher's glass. He turned fast enough to make the world smear. Across the street a woman lifted an umbrella. Her face was Elise's face 10 years ago, untouched by the Seattle years that had ground him down. She watched him as if waiting for him to remember a password. Then traffic swallowed the space between them. When the cabs cleared, the sidewalk was empty, but for a leaf moving like a small animal. He would have blamed sleeplessness if not for the envelope that waited under his door when he got back upstairs. It bore no stamp, only his name in the neat, schoolteacher cursive Elise had used when she practiced letters with their niece at Thanksgiving. Inside was a motel key on a plastic fob. 90 Motor Court, room 27. On the back of the key tag, a single word was written in greased pencil. Still. Michael held the key as if it were hot. He knew the place. A strip of sun-faded doors facing a truck lot near Ellensburg. A place they had stopped once because rain had drowned the freeway and Elise had said, "Let's pretend it's a road movie. Let's pretend there's time." He put the key on his kitchen table and stood over it like a bomb tech. Either someone was playing a mean trick, or Elise was alive, and either way going would destroy what little balance he had left. The notes had rung at 3:17. The key had found its way into his apartment. He left a note for his sister. "Taking a day. I'm fine." And took I-90 East. The motel still had the chalky stucco and the neon vacancy sign that buzzed like a jar of hornets. Rain stitched lines across the windshield as he pulled into the cracked lot. Room 27's curtain was drawn. He took the key in, listened for a laugh or a breath held badly, and unlocked the door. It smelled like old heat and laundry soap. The television remote sat square on the dresser, aligned as neatly as a librarian would do it. On the bed lay a yellow slicker, the same brand as Elise's. the cuff stitched where he had tried and failed to sew it right. His heart climbed into his throat and stayed there, beating against the soft palate. A second envelope waited beside the slicker. Inside, 3 snapshots. Elise on Alki Pier that last day, laughing, rain on her eyelashes. Elise in their old kitchen holding a crooked cake, and Elise at this very motel, a decade younger, the exact bedspread behind her, the same vintage. Exit. Sign bent at the corner above the door. This was impossible. He would have noticed if anyone had asked to digitize their old prints. He would have known if their apartment had been rifled. His phone was in his hand before he knew he had decided. He called 911 and heard his voice sound like someone else's. "I think I've found evidence in a missing person case," he said. "A decade cold. Please send someone." 2 Washington State Patrol officers arrived first, then a county deputy with a half-shaved head and a gentle voice. They photographed the room like a crime scene. Michael answered questions that made the past shuffle and restack. The fight that last day about the boat, about money, about whether grief was a choice. He didn't tell them about the 3 notes at 3:17. It sounded like a superstition, a small madness he wanted to keep private. They told him a Seattle detective would follow up. He drove home with the slicker folded on the passenger seat, rain ticking at the hood. He thought, "I have stolen evidence," and then thought, "It was mine to begin with." When he reached the apartment, the door was ajar, though he was sure he had locked it. He pushed it open with the toe of his boot and called out, "Hello?" The air inside tasted like pennies. On the kitchen table lay a spiral-bound notebook he had not seen in 10 years. Elise had bought it at a campus bookstore, loving the bright red cover. Across the top page, in that same tidy hand as the envelope, a sentence had been written. "Please forgive the way time works here." He didn't open the notebook then. He put both hands on either side of it and breathed like a swimmer. The hallway light flickered. The fridge motor breathed in, out, in. He carried the notebook to the couch and sat with it in his lap, not yet reading, just feeling the weight. He woke to the sound of the old 3 chimes in a house that didn't own such a clock. 3:17 flashed on the digital again, as if the room itself had decided it, as if electricity were a rumor that could be rewritten. Detective Sarah O'Malley from Seattle PD phoned at 8 a.m. sharp. Her voice was steady, a person who liked facts. She asked him to come down to the public safety building. He brought the slicker and the notebook and the key. The lobby smelled like wet coats. In an interview room, with a table scarred by decades of impatience, O'Malley laid out the photos in a neat row and clicked a pen in a way that said she had made bigger men than him cry. "Mr. Weaver, you filed the missing person in 2015. You maintained contact with the case for 2 years, then the calls tapered. What changed?" she asked. "Hope," he said, and hated the drama of it. "I got tired of being a person with a hollow. But this," he touched the motel photo, "this is a new hole." They talked about Elise's last day. He told her the simple, embarrassing truth. They'd fought about money. He'd called her unkind. She'd said he was turning into a stranger city. And then she had put on her slicker and gone for a walk along the water to clear her head. No one saw her after that. There were sonar sweeps, dogs, a lone hiker's rumor of a scream in the wind. Nothing real. O'Malley slid the notebook toward her with a gloved hand. "May I?" He nodded. The first page was dated the spring before Elise vanished. A grocery list, cilantro, limes, ginger, and beneath it, cramped and hurried. Woke up at 3:17 from the sound, but the clock isn't plugged in. It said 3:17 anyway. The sound was the old chimes from my mother's kitchen. I could smell lemon oil. Later entries shifted. A confession about a secret savings account for a trip she wanted to surprise him with. A worry she couldn't shake that the water at the pier had changed color in a way she couldn't photograph. The day before she vanished. If the tide opens the way the old man said, there will be steps. This is wrong. The word wrong was written 3 times, as if the first 2 had not been loud enough. "Who's the old man?" O'Malley asked. Michael swallowed. "There was a guy at the pier the week before. Dry as driftwood." He watched the water and told anyone who'd listen that the sound had another tide beneath it. One for people and one for something else. We laughed. Elise did not laugh. She asked him questions until he ran out of answers or patience. O'Malley raised an eyebrow. "And this motel?" We stopped once when the freeway flooded. The lobby had a jar of plastic-wrapped peppermints from 1999. Elise said it was a place where time got hung up in the gutter. O'Malley pinned the motel key's fob under her finger. "I've already called Ellensburg. Room 27 registered to cash yesterday afternoon. No ID. The clerk remembers a woman with a yellow raincoat hood up. He also said she didn't look wet." Michael's skin prickled as if cold air had moved through him. "Are you telling me?" "I'm telling you I don't know what I'm telling you," O'Malley said. "But we're not closing this as a prank. I'm assigning a unit to the motel, and I want you to stay reachable. No solo heroics." She slid a card across to him. "And keep a journal. Record when the time does what you say it does." He wanted to say, "I'm already drowning in journals." Instead, he nodded and left with the slicker and the notebook inside an evidence envelope he had been allowed to carry home. "For comfort," the clerk said, and winked as if comfort were something that could be signed for. That night the chimes came earlier, 3:16, then 3:17 exactly. 3 notes, and a thin after echo like breath on a bottle. Michael didn't sleep. He propped the notebook on the coffee table and began his own log, writing down insignificant things. The weather, a line of dialogue from a neighbor's television, the exact moment his building's heat banged through the pipes. At 3:17, he wrote, Elise's chimes. Apartment clocks adjust themselves? Phone time holds steady. Bathroom mirror fogs and rings, like something breathing against it. At 3:19, the apartment intercom rasped. He flinched so hard the pen left a comment across the page. He went to the door. The lobby camera showed a woman with her head down, a hood shadowing her face. He pressed the buzzer. The elevator creaked, a mercifully slow rise, time enough to decide he was a fool. A knock. He opened the door and saw a face that could have been Elise's before the city, before the years, lit from within by a patient winter sun. "Michael," she said, and the word wasn't a question. He wanted to touch her and wanted to run. "Elise?" She shook her head once, a small, surgical movement, and smiled with only half her mouth as she had when she was sure he was wrong but loved him anyway. "They don't like that name here," she said. "Not after this long. I go by Lee's. Less to pull on." He made space for her to pass, and she moved through the apartment like it remembered her. She touched the back of the couch, the magnet on the fridge, the yellow slicker folded on the chair. "You kept it," she said, and there was relief so honest in her voice that he almost cried. "Where have you been?" he asked. "Are you hurt? Do you need?" "Everything," she said, "but not yet. Tonight I just need you to listen." She told a story that should have collapsed under its own weight. The night she vanished, she had walked along the pier until the wind changed. It smelled like lemon oil and old clocks. The chimes she loved as a child seemed to come up through the pilings. She looked down, and the water was wrong. Skin instead of liquid, a surface that flexed as if it might breathe. She stepped back, and steps bloomed where her footprints had been, wooden treads dry in the rain. A staircase that went down where there was nothing to go down into. "I know how it sounds," she said. "I thought it was a panic attack shaped like a miracle. But I had been talking to the old man all week. He told me there are places where the world is thinner. The tide goes out for us, and something else's tide comes in. He said if you hear the clock sing, and you look down instead of away, you'll see what wants you. And you went." Michael's voice surprised him. No judgment, only the worn note of a person who has learned not to trust either hope or despair. Lise put the notebook on her knees and ran her thumb along the quill. "I went because I thought time might give us a do-over. I could come back before the fight. Or I could find the place where the hurt we were carrying could be set down. Michael, it wasn't like that. It was a hall of mirrors that breathed. It remembered me the way a cut remembers the knife." She described rooms made of fog and bone-white railing, corridors that sloped while insisting they were level. Sometimes she found herself in the motel on I-90, every single detail exactly as it had been in 2013. Sometimes she was in their kitchen, smelling cilantro and ginger. But there was always a yawning hatch in the floor somewhere, a circle rimmed with rust, and if she stared too long at it, something under the world exhaled and said her name not as a sound but as a decision. Elise Lees Less. "How long were you?" He couldn't say gone. "Minutes," she said. "Hours. A winter." The clocks there are cruel. When I climbed back into the rain, it was 10 years forward. The sound was the sound again, but different places had copied themselves. The motel room existed twice. Our kitchen remembered us more faithfully than I do. Why come to the motel? Why leave the key? Because the rooms that remember us can be steered a little, she said. Every night at 3:17, that place chooses. If you set things on the dresser in a certain way, the door opens here instead of there. I've been trying to get back to you for years in the wrong nights. Last night it tilted in our favor. She slept on the couch while he sat with his hands around a mug that had long since gone cold. She dreamed and made small animal sounds, as if she were moving through a forest of soft metal. Near dawn she woke and said, "They know I came back." She didn't explain who they were, and he didn't ask. He had a good guess. The thin parts of the world had a kind of housekeeping, and Lise had tracked mud across the good rug. By noon they were at Seattle PD. O'Malley listened the way a surgeon listens to a family standing at the edge of bad news. She asked precise questions and wrote answers in a neat hand that looked not unlike Elise's. Dates, the smell of lemon oil, a hatch. "You understand how this sounds," O'Malley said at last, her voice kind. "I can't enter a breathing staircase into a system that expects vehicle seen leaving scene. But I can look for structure. Where? When? Who? 90 Motor Court. The pier at Alki. Your apartment at 317. We can set surveillance. We can test whether the cameras fail." "They will," Lise said, and the sadness in her voice made Michael's skin crawl. "They don't like being seen unless they're the ones seeing." That night, at O'Malley's suggestion, Michael set up his phone on a stack of books aimed at the front door. He pressed record and set a battery pack to keep it alive. At 3:16 the lights dimmed, brightened, dimmed, brightened, as if the building were breathing through an asthma attack. At 3:17, 3 chimes. The video captured nothing, just a faint blur, as if a shirt had moved quickly past the lens, and the sound of Michael saying Lisa's name and getting back the echo of his own voice. They returned to the motel the following evening with 2 SPD surveillance vans parked discreetly at the edge of the lot. O'Malley was there with headphones. "If the other tide comes in," she said, "I want to know whether it leaves footprints." Rain sharpened to needles that bounced in the lot light. Room 27's door eased open, though no one touched the knob. The air that poured out was colder than any weather, and tasted like pennies and lemon peel. Inside, the bedspread's pattern shifted if you looked directly at it, and stayed still if you looked sideways. The TV flickered with channels from a decade earlier, a newscaster announcing a snowstorm that had hardened the city in 2014, a commercial for a car no one bought anymore. On the nightstand sat a copy of a local paper from that winter, the date smeared by damp but legible. O'Malley whispered into her mic, "Documenting breach of timeline plausibility," and the sentence felt like she had set a spell. The bathroom door had a rust ring around the knob. When Lise turned it, the room beyond was not a motel bathroom. It was a narrow corridor of painted concrete with condensation crawling down the walls. The sound it made was exactly like someone whispering under their breath. And if you stood long enough, you could convince yourself the whisper shaped your name. They went only as far as a metal grate where the floor fell away. Below, darkness moved like a slow lung. O'Malley's breath sounded loud over the radio. "We're done," she said, her professional voice back. "We saw. We're done." She reached to close the door, but it resisted as if a hand on the other side held it firmly open. For one heartbeat, Michael thought he heard a second set of chimes made of bone. Lise put her palm on the door and said, very softly, "Not tonight." The door grew heavy with reluctance, then shut. They were not done. The Sound has 2 low tides each day. Whatever lay under it seemed to have moods like weather. The next afternoon, an SPD tech phoned. The motel cameras captured an empty parking lot from 3:16 to 3:20, not static, not black, simply absent frames. At the same time, a caller on Alki dialed 911 to report a woman in a yellow coat standing at the very end of the pier, untroubled by wind, her face turned toward the hatch that wasn't there. O'Malley split her team. 1 van at the motel, one unmarked car at Alki, Michael kept under instruction at home. Lise insisted on staying with him. "They follow the lit paths," she said. "If we scatter, we give them more doors." At 3:17 the lights went. The apartment filled with the smell of wet iron. The chime sounded both inside the room and inside their heads. The hallway light outside their door flickered in a way that made it look like someone was walking toward them and never arriving. The intercom rasped. O'Malley's voice came through it, though she was nowhere near. "Do not open. Do not." The latch on the apartment door turned by itself a quarter inch, half, 3/4. The deadbolt held. Something exhaled in the hall, and said Lise with the exact breath Michael used when he woke her in the middle of the night to ask if she was awake. Michael took the deadbolt in both hands. "You don't get to have my voice," he said, and his voice trembled but did not break. Lise set the old slicker on the floor in front of the door like a threshold cloth and whispered, "This is ours." The latch stopped turning. The smell of lemon oil thinned, as if a window had opened somewhere else. They did not sleep. In the morning, O'Malley texted a photo from her unmarked car at Alki. In it, the pier's planks looked dry despite rain. A circle of rust bled up from the wood near the end, as if a hatch that wasn't there had sweated through. On the circle's rim were marks like fingerprints pressed into old metal. The print pattern matched Elise's right hand from a coffee mug SPD had seized 10 years earlier. "Michael," O'Malley wrote beneath the photo, "we are past what my job knows how to do. I'm with you anyway." The next day, a body washed up near Seacrest, male, mid-50s, drowned with no water in his lungs. His clothes were from another decade. A Sonics t-shirt so bright it hurt to look at, jeans cut in a way no one had done since 2002. O'Malley did not tell the press. She called Michael and asked, "Did you know a man at the pier 10 years back who talked about a second tide?" Michael said yes, and O'Malley said, "He is returned, and he is not." The coroner wrote, "Cardiac anomaly." O'Malley wrote nothing and underlined it. Lisa's notebook grew fatter by the day as she wrote what she remembered when memory behaved. Michael kept his own log as O'Malley had asked, the hour the lights went, the number of steps between his couch and the front door when the apartment shrank a little, the exact words said through the intercom in his own voice. Some nights nothing happened, and they would make dinner and pretend the city was only a city. Some nights the floor tilted. One evening Lise said, "They want a trade." Her face was the face he'd first fallen in love with, unbruised by the decade she had spent in hallways that breathed wrong. "They're patient, but they like patterns. 10 years is a kind of song to them. If I go back at the same minute I left, with the same coat and the same fear, they'll let you go." "Go where?" he asked, and didn't mean geography. "To a version of us that kept the grocery list simple," she said. "To a life where we learn sooner not to say the worst thing first. Somewhere that still wants us." It was an obscenity dressed as a gift. He wanted to refuse and realized he didn't know to whom refusal could be delivered. "Or," she said, and her voice changed, going careful, "we can break the metronome." She explained what she had learned in the rooms that remembered. The doors prefer symmetry. The 3 chimes are a courtesy and a demand. The cameras hate being witnesses. If you see the time, they take the shape. But if you tear one tooth from the gear, if you change one fixed part without permission, the doors slam for a while. The breath beneath the world gets held. How? He asked. We go where it started and do something ugly, she said. We ruin the hatch's sense of itself. Seattle that night felt like a boat cut from its moorings. The rain was intermittent and mean. O'Malley met them at Seacrest with a toolbox that wasn't police issue. I'm off duty, she said, hypothetically. In the toolbox lay magnesium flares, a crowbar, a coil of heavy rope, a sledgehammer that looked too theatrical to be real. Do not tell me what I'm helping you do, she said. Let me help, and let me lie smooth later. They walked the pier and stopped when the boards grew dry under their shoes, when the smell of lemon oil lifted like church. The rust circle was visible only if you looked out of the corner of your eye. Looked it directly, it was merely wet wood. Lee set the slicker down as if dressing an altar. Michael took the sledgehammer and swung. The board shuddered but did not break. He swung again, and something below them exhaled in annoyance, then in warning. They worked until their breath made smoke and their arms shook. O'Malley tied the rope around a piling and used it to brace her weight as she pried at the seam that was not a seam. The wood beneath her hands grew warmer, then hot, then cold like fish. The circle widened a hair, then 2 hairs. From below came the 3 chimes, not sweet this time, but made of teeth. The sound hurt Michael's molars. Lee's whispered, "Now!" and Michael jammed a flare into the widening seam. Light ate the dark like a wolf. For a second, he saw it. A stairwell that was not a stairwell, ribs like rafters, and far below a surface that moved with a mind. The flare hissed and sputtered. The hatch flexed like an eyelid. The pier groaned. O'Malley hauled Lee's back by the rope as the boards buckled, and the circle shrank like a mouth pursed against hot soup. The flare went out with a small, wet sound. The wood steamed. The smell of lemon oil scorched to something like charred sugar. Silence. Then the city's ordinary sounds rushed back as if someone had opened a valve. A bus brake squealing, a laugh from the shadow of a restaurant, the whine of a siren blocks away. The 3 chimes tried to ring and failed once, twice, then stopped. Not because they had ended, but because time had decided to look somewhere else for a minute. They waited. Nothing happened. O'Malley leaned her forehead against the piling and breathed like a person who had finished a sprint and was trying to pretend she had not. "If anyone asks," she said, "we were never here." For 3 nights the clocks behaved. The apartment stayed the size an apartment should be. The motel cameras recorded only rain. Michael dreamed of ordinary disasters. Late rent, burned sauce. He woke to find Lee's awake beside him, not sleeping much anymore. "It didn't like that," she said softly. "We bruised it. It is old and it is petty." On the 4th night, 3:17 came without song. At 3:23 the intercom said, in O'Malley's voice, "Do not open. Do not." And then became a stranger's voice Michael had never heard, saying his name in a way no one good would say it. The door did not turn. The hallway light did not flicker. The breathing beneath the city held itself like a diver too proud to surface in front of rivals. They almost made it to morning. At 5:02, the building's fire alarms shrieked themselves hoarse, then died mid-howl. The sprinkler in the hallway blew a black, thin mist that smelled like pennies and lemon peel. Michael opened the door onto a corridor that was not their corridor. The same length, the same door numbers, but the carpet pattern wrong by one repeating leaf. The exit signs in a font no manufacturer would confess to. "Back inside," O'Malley said from the stairwell. She had come on instinct, following a feeling she would later call professional dread. Her badge was in her pocket, her gun on her hip. She looked at the corridor the way you look at a dream, where the logic is strong enough to be convincing. "We can't fight a hallway," she said calmly, "but we can refuse to walk it." A sound came from the far end. Not footsteps, footless steps, the shape of walking. Lise put her hand on the slicker where it hung on a hook. "They want me to go back and stitch the 10 years into a neat hem," she said. "They want you to forget me without guilt, the very thing you tried to do to survive. We can either allow the anesthesia or take the pain." Michael thought of the motel bedspread that changed when you stared at it, the lemon oil smell of a clock that had outlived its house, the old man's body found by a tide that was not water. He thought of Elise's first grocery list, and how she had written cilantro twice by accident, and then laughed like a child caught rewriting a wish. "We take the pain," he said. They did not walk the hallway. They closed the door. They sat on the floor with their backs against it, while the apartment tried on small wrong sizes, like a person in a mirror who cannot settle on an outfit. The chimes did not come, and that was a victory and a threat. When the morning finally arrived like a truce, the hallway was the right hallway again. 2 days later, a woman checked into the I-90 motor court, yellow slicker, hood up, not wet, and asked for room 27. The clerk handed over the key with a shrug he would later describe as feeling like a déjà vu caught in my throat. The SPD van recorded nothing for 4 minutes. When the frames returned, room 27's door was half open, and on the bed lay a spiral notebook with a red cover and a single sentence across the first page. "Please forgive the way time works here." Michael didn't read the press when the city finally learned some version of their story. "Urban legend collides with police investigation," the stranger wrote. "Romance, grief, and the unexplained." The Times offered more careful. He did keep O'Malley's text. A body turned up near Ellensburg. Clothes from a decade ago. No water in lungs. Might be the other clerk. Might be something else. Stay in tonight. They stayed. They set the slicker on the floor like a ritual. They set the notebook on the table like a map. At 3:17 nothing happened. At 3:18, a single chime sounded very far away, as if the city had remembered the sound but decided not to teach it to itself again. Michael wrote in his journal, "If nothing is calling, who reset the clock to hear it?" He didn't expect an answer. But in the morning, when he opened the notebook to the last page, there was a new sentence, written in the neat hand he had loved since college. Still here. Less to pull on. More to hold. The investigation never truly closed. O'Malley kept a file thicker than rules allowed. People called with stories that didn't fit anywhere else. A ferry that arrived 3 minutes early with a passenger list that had one extra name. A stoplight that never turned green on 3rd and Marion from 3:16 to 3:23 nights in a row. A child who said his grandmother smelled like lemon oil just before she died, and then woke saying she dreamed of a hatch. They learned to live near the seam. They left the apartment at odd hours to confuse the metronome. They drove I-90 and waved at room 27 without stopping. They visited the pier and pretended the boards were only boards. They kept the sledgehammer under the bed because it felt better to have a weight that belonged to the world. Sometimes late, when the city had the precise silence of a stage waiting for the curtain, Michael would wake at 3:17 exactly and hear no chimes at all. He would think of the old man who had believed he was doing people a favor by talking about a second tide, and he would whisper to the ceiling, "We know you're there. We know you're petty. We are more stubborn than your clocks." Beside him, Lise would turn in her sleep and smile without waking, as if she had heard something make room for them. And on the nights when rain flattened the sound into dull pewter, and the hatch rust ghosted up in a ring at the end of the pier, Detective Sarah O'Malley would stand with her hands in her pockets and look like a person trying not to salute. She would mutter into the dark, "You can have the hours you stole. We're keeping the minutes." No one ever solved the mystery of how the motel key reached Michael's table that first night, or why the apartment clocks obeyed a song no device remembered. The stories branched like the veins in a leaf. But in the notebook, with its red cover that went glossy where rain had touched it and dried, two hands wrote over the months in a combined language of apology and defiance, building a record of a life that refused to be folded neatly into a season. If time wanted a trade, it could learn to bargain. If the hatch wanted a name to breathe, it would have to learn to pronounce both of theirs.
Thumbs up if you believe raptors and wild rivers deserve protection, like, subscribe, and share. Bell turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story in this series. Disclaimer, this is a fictional narrative. No animals were harmed. We support legal, ethical hunting and conservation. Poaching is a crime.